What's something you confessed to your partner that ended your relationship instantly? True story. I confessed that I wanted to do more for her. I felt like I was neglecting her and working too much. The next week, she sat me down and told me that I was threatening her independence and that she needed 1 week to think about us. The week after that, she broke up with me. Story 2. I told them that I did not like the person they became when they were around one specific friend. They became mean, petty, rude, and overly critical of everything, while demanding that I chauffeur them around because they did not drive. They would get completely drunk, roll on the ground, and say the ugliest things. I was shocked to see what felt like a stranger in my partner's body. So I said I now understood why some people asked their partners not to see certain friends anymore. Apparently that made me abusive and they claimed I was trying to isolate them. They were cheating on me with that friend. Then they cheated on that person as well, went through multiple roommates including 2 former friends and a vague acquaintance. All of them later apologized for believing what was said about me. They also ended up owing 2 of them thousands of dollars in damages. I feel like I dodged a massive cannonball. Story 3. I told him that I got a promotion and a raise. He went on a rampage, broke my laptop and phone, and threatened me for making him feel inferior, even though he refused to work while in college on his 3rd bachelor's degree. He called me abusive and then blamed me for making him react like that. He said he was breaking up with me unless I apologized. Story 4. I told her that there was a point in our relationship when I just wanted to up and leave. I guess she took that as a sign that we needed to break up. She didn't even want to hear why I had those thoughts. It was because there was no reciprocation in the relationship. I would work, clean, pay bills, get groceries, basically do everything, while she did nothing to help, not even offer assistance. I would practically beg her to help out around the place. It got so bad that on my way back from a shopping trip, I thought, she doesn't actually love me, and I should just leave and head back to my parents for a week. It was a very emotional time for me because I loved her and didn't want to abandon her, but deep down I knew she didn't actually care for me. I supported her through tough times, paid her medical bills, I basically did everything for her. Story 5. I dated a coworker during the time we were broken up. She had made it clear she didn't want to date, and even though we were friends with benefits, she was also my manager. She would always sleep with other guys. I moved on from trying to change her mind and started dating another coworker, and I just didn't tell her because it wasn't her business. After that relationship ended, she finally changed her mind and wanted to date. I kept my previous relationship a secret for a few months, and when I eventually told her, she broke down crying as if I had cheated on her. Story 6. I told him I was pregnant with his child after we had been together for 6 years and while I was on the Nuvaring. Apparently, it was my fault I got pregnant, even though he could have worn a condom. But it's for the best. He once told me he didn't want to be with someone with a terminal illness. I don't have a terminal illness and never did. Story 7. My girlfriend at the time confessed that she wanted to sleep with one of my coworkers. I was already suspicious that she wasn't being as exclusive as she expected me to be, so I told her she was welcome to, but we would need to break up first. She said she didn't want to break up, but a week later she said she needed a break from relationships for a while. I considered the relationship over at that point. The next 6 weeks were filled with my coworker talking about all the banging he was having. I just said things like, "Good for you," and "Get yours, bro," and changed the subject whenever he brought it up. She never contacted me during that time. After 6 weeks, she called me to hang out, then spent 2 hours complaining about how all he wanted was to do it and that he never took her anywhere like we used to. She said she missed me. I asked if she had ever slept with him before we broke up, and she launched into an obviously prepared speech about how we never broke up and were just on a break, never answering my question. I had found someone I really liked during those 6 weeks, so I told her we were officially over. She kept asking to meet up, asking to do it with her, and started obsessing, so I ended up blocking her everywhere. She even started making new accounts to message me and my new girlfriend, trying to break us up. We ignored her until she moved on, and I ended up marrying my new girlfriend. So I guess you could say that confession changed my life for the better. Story 8. My friend told us that she had threatened to off herself if her boyfriend broke up with her. I said that was toxic and that I would not off myself if my boyfriend broke up with me. My boyfriend broke up with me the next day because apparently not wanting to off myself meant my love for him was not real. 7th grade is completely messed up. I am a middle school teacher now, and whenever I feel shocked by the behavior I see, I think back to this. Story 9. I broke down crying during a more realistic war movie. She told me to suck it up. After she confronted me about drinking too much, I finally sought VA disability. I was diagnosed with depression, PTSD, anxiety, among other things. The bills started pouring in, and I told her we could not afford certain luxury items because I was the sole breadwinner. I said I felt like I was drowning and that my head was slowly slipping under the surface. She told me to figure it out. So I did. We divorced. I am much happier now and no longer on the train of be a man and tighten your bootstraps. I got help and learned that it is okay to do so. Story 10. I said that I did not believe the Bible was scientific fact. I did not realize her family were hardcore fundamentalist Christians who spoke in tongues and believed everything in the Bible was both historical and scientific fact. She broke up with me on the spot. We had only been dating a couple of weeks, and it was the first time religion had come up. We stayed friendly but never went out again. 2 years later, she was dating a woman and was abandoned by her family. 3 years after that, she married that woman and began transitioning to become a man. He has now been happily married to his wife for about 10 years and has not had any contact with his family since. Story 11. I realized that I did not love her enough to be happy spending the rest of my life with her. We got together because the circumstances made sense, but I am afraid I never truly loved her. I was comfortable and enjoyed feeling loved. I treated her as well as I could, but deep down I knew I would never be able to give back what she gave me. I still feel guilty for breaking her heart over something she will likely never fully understand, and that will never feel fair to her. Story 12. She asked me to open up about my feelings. She literally said that men do not open up enough. I opened up, and then she became distant, and it was over. Sometimes I feel that toxic masculinity is something many women claim to dislike, while at the same time wanting the credit for being open and accepting of men having feelings. What I expressed was that I felt expected to be strong all the time, and that it felt oppressive. Ironic. Story 13. I told her she was cruel when she was drunk and that I barely recognized her anymore because of her drinking. She replied, "Why don't you just hit me?" She was trying to shift my stress and concerns about her drinking into me being the abusive one, when in reality she became manipulative and mean when she drank. It ended about 3 days later, after I left her at my friend's house when she got completely drunk on a night we had agreed we would not be drinking. Story 14. Not me, but my ex confessed that he had put a tracker on my phone. He only admitted it after my friend started pointing out how he would always show up wherever I or they were. Before anyone jumps on me, these were mutual friends, and he would be invited but always come up with some excuse not to go. Apparently he was watching us, and the times we saw him were only the times we caught him. He followed us basically every time. Needless to say, I broke up with him immediately. Story 15. I have brain damage to the point that I cannot experience any positive emotions, love, happiness, or anything else I can think of. I confessed that I liked her, but I do not feel anything toward her. All my I love yous feel empty, and I cannot live with the constant lies to her and to myself. Edit. After some people commented, I have learned it may not be brain damage. There is talk it could be alexithymia or anhedonia, though none of those fully match what I experience. I fear that I may not find answers for what I am suffering from. In the worst-case scenario, I could have something the world has not seen before, which would explain why I cannot find any information. For anyone with a TBI, I want to apologize if I have offended you. That is not my intent. It is simply the best way I can explain my experience with the information I have. Story 16. I had a partner who kept pushing me to tell him about my past. I insisted that I did not want to, because every time I had opened up to someone before, they had not taken it well. He kept insisting that he would never react like that. So I told him about being essayed and about struggling with depression for the past 6 years. He responded, "Why would you ever tell me that? I did not want to know that." Story 17. She found out that I had heart problems. I had a major heart attack and had to stay in the hospital for a few days. I started to improve, but the hospital became overcrowded, so I was sent home because my girlfriend would be there to watch for any signs of trouble. I then had another heart attack and she left in the middle of it. She just said, "I can't." Story 18. Ours was a fairly mutual confession. We had just gone through lockdown and the legalization of weed, which meant a lot of time alone and a low level of constant inebriation. Introspection tends to happen in that kind of environment. They confessed first and told me they were bi. We talked about their attractions and old crushes they had barely allowed themselves to acknowledge. I was not surprised and it did not change much for me. A week later, I confessed that I had felt a waxing and waning but otherwise constant desire not to be a man for most of my childhood and adult life. I told them I had almost come out to the people close to me about a dozen times over 20 years. They responded by shouting, "I friggin' knew it." They responded by shouting, "I friggin' knew it." The next few weeks were full of conversations, some light and some more serious. In the end, we reached a turning point. They wanted to move to the city when our lease ended, and I did not want to find a new job. With so much personal change happening, we decided to separate and figure out what we each wanted. 2.5 years later, they are still in the city and have realized they are non-binary, as well as bisexual. I am still in the suburbs, transgender and asexual. We still spend time together, and our former relationship has settled into a close friendship. Story 19. I told her that I had depression. I was crying in front of her, and since she had gone through 2 bouts of depression during our relationship, I thought she could help. Instead, she called the cops on me and had me thrown out of the house. It was only deeded in her name. We had been married for years, so it seemed safe and steady. I had just never asked for help before then. She said she never wanted to talk to me again and then refused to divorce me, so I divorced her. Life's weird. Story 20. A new partner and I did mutual STI testing so we could start skipping protections. I'm snipped. Their results came back positive for Trico, and I hadn't gotten mine yet. They became overly apologetic and started slut-shaming themselves, which made me sad. I tried to remind them that protections aren't perfect and they could have just as easily gotten it from me. But they wouldn't let up, insisting it was their fault and apologizing for exposing me. I sat them down and went through my entire history since my last test, hoping to stop them from blaming themselves for what is essentially the mildest STI imaginable. They broke up with me the next day, saying they couldn't protect their sexual health around someone so promiscuous. My test later came back negative for Trico. Story 21. I caused a breakup just by having opinions and existing in an insulated Southern relationship. My boyfriend left because I was being myself and expressing opinions that clashed with his Southern Baptist, super wealthy, perfect family. I'm from the South Florida, and his mother couldn't stand me. I came from the wrong side of the tracks, and nothing I did was ever good enough. She caught me gossiping once about a teen pregnancy involving a family friend and bullied me for weeks over it. Another time, she found out I got my boyfriend alcohol for his 22nd birthday and harassed me, saying I was trying to make her son an alcoholic. At the time, my father was in rehab and I was helping him get sober. The cruelty in her words was unmatched even to this day. Eventually, it became too much for my ex, and he broke up with me over text 3 days before I graduated college. I'll never fully recover from that. This woman is still high society in Northeast Florida. She goes to church every Sunday, never curses, and donates a ridiculous amount to charity. Everyone thinks she's a saint, yet she nearly destroyed me. She is why I don't attend church anymore. And yes, I dodged a bullet when my boyfriend left me. Story 22. I had the flu this week and was so dehydrated that I honestly thought I might die in my sleep. I reached out to my friend, telling him I had a tough day and that I missed him. I told him how happy he made me feel and how much I trusted him. I love him as a person and a friend. He completely misunderstood and assumed I meant it romantically. He told me to never text him again and to leave him alone. At the time, I was so sick and was simply trying to express my gratitude because I truly thought I might be on my deathbed and might never speak to him again. Another friend noticed something was wrong, came over and took me to the ER. I was admitted overnight to treat dehydration and help my body recover from the flu. Thankfully, I'm feeling better now and can hold food down. I guess I thought he was a better friend, but I was completely wrong. Story 23. I told him that I was starting therapy because of my mental health issues. Our relationship didn't end immediately, but he became very cold afterward. He was angry that I went to a therapist instead of just thinking more positively, even though that's not how mental health works. In his view, therapists are manipulative a-holes who try to make money off others and invent mental disorders. Story 24. The reverse of the question, but I briefly dated someone who had just finished studying a very intense subject at one of the best universities in the world. He told me he didn't know how to open a bank account and kept all his money in his closet. I couldn't handle it. Being so wildly intelligent that he neglected the basics made me realize the relationship would basically be like parenting a child who could do PhD-level math in the morning, work as a neurosurgeon all day, and then come home to tell me he learned Mandarin on the subway, all while I cut his grapes in half to prevent him from choking. It's hard to explain a person who is mind-blowingly intelligent and an idiot at the same time. I just couldn't do it. He reminded me of Sheldon, but with a TBI that deleted common sense. I'm glad society fosters his incredible mind, because without warning labels, he might not have survived. Story 25. Her name was Zelda. She was a calligraphy enthusiast with a slight overbite. We were together, we bathed together, and we even shared the same piece of mint-flavored dental floss. The world was our burrito. So we got married, bought a house, and had 2 children, Nathaniel and Superfly. Then she asked if we should join the Columbia Record Club, and I said, whoa, hold on a minute. I'm not sure I'm ready for that kind of commitment. So we broke up, and I never saw her again. Story 26. I was on the receiving end of something like this. I was looking into grad school and noticed my husband wasn't being very supportive. He confessed that he didn't want me to go and be successful because he feared I would leave him if I ever achieved success. After that, I never saw him the same way. I became very aware of how I had been blind to his attempts to hold me back from my dreams for years. I left him. Story 27. I dated a girl for about 2 months. From the start, she told me that physical intimacy was off the table until she felt a real romantic connection, which was fine by me. One night, she finally trusted me enough to admit that she smoked weed often. That wasn't an issue for me, but we come from a country where all drugs are heavily stigmatized, so she still kept it a secret from most people. Feeling relieved that I was cool with it, she decided to confess something else. She was a virgin. I told her that wasn't a problem for me and was just curious why it hadn't happened yet. She explained that low self-esteem as a teen, combined with social pressure, had made losing her V-card feel like something she should wait for the ideal circumstances and match. After all this, I felt compelled to come clean too, since I had had many more intimate partners than the average person in our country. As soon as I told her the number, she immediately said, "Yeah, that's way too much for me. I don't want to date you anymore." We just sat awkwardly for about 5 minutes before I got up and left. Story 28. I confessed that I had severe anxiety and depression but had kept it hidden because I didn't want to burden anyone. They left me, saying they couldn't handle that along with their own problems. It's okay. I've been with my current partner for over a year now, and they understand mental illness. Instead of judging, they support me in every way they can. Story 29. As a man over 55, I can honestly say, ignorance is bliss. Unless they're going to find out eventually, you have nothing to gain and everything to lose by coming clean. Big things like abortion, previous marriages, STDs, or a family history of mental illness should be disclosed if you're planning to get serious. But your body count, 3 scores, or even bizarre intimate experiences, they don't need to know. Anything can and will be used against you. Story 30. COVID lockdowns kept us from seeing each other for most of the year. By 2021, I was trying to get her to go out with me since I hadn't seen her in so long. I confessed that I felt neglected and that I thought she was more into her cop groups than me. She got mad and broke up with me a few weeks later. Story 31. My ex-girlfriend was dealing with severe depression. I told her mom and stepfather about it so they could help me encourage her to seek medical help and be there for support. Her mom chickened out when they went to lunch to talk about it and never brought it up. Things got worse, and I told her I had reached out to them because I was concerned for her well-being and wanted to figure things out. She immediately broke up with me. I moved out, and 2 months later she tried to off herself by swallowing a bottle of pills, but she survived. I think she moved away after that, and I've never heard from her since. You can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped. Story 32. I told her that I didn't like the way she treated me when I was helping her out. She didn't drive and found errands very stressful. So when we were dating, I was happy to run to the store with her so she could stock up on kitty litter and big bags of flour. But every time we did, she would get super irritable, snapping at me for offering or not offering to carry things, standing too close, or not understanding exactly what she needed before telling me. I swear I was trying my best. I honestly thought it would be a straightforward conversation and that she'd apologize and work on it once she realized what was happening. Story 33. I'm actually going through this right now. After months of no intimacy, my partner of 17 years recently told me they aren't as attracted to me as they used to be because I've put on weight. I'm not rolling in the deep, but I'm not the 70 kilos I used to be either. I've helped raise and put her 2 kids through private schooling. I've supported her when she wasn't working and when she wanted a career change. I drive 9 hours to get to my job the day before a block of 7, 12.5-hour shifts, only to travel 9 hours home afterward. I feel gutted and worthless. I don't think our relationship can survive this. I never knew she was that shallow. Story 34. She asked me if she could have a girlfriend while still being in a relationship with me. There was a lesbian coworker at her branch. I said no. A week later, she broke up with me and got together with that girl. They broke up after a month of dating. Wild. Story 35. It's funny now, but before I was diagnosed as autistic, I knew something was different. As soon as I read about autistic women, I showed him and said, "Don't I fit all of these? Every single one." He said something like, "You're not autistic because you don't like math or numbers." He refused to support me when I tried to go private for a diagnosis and eventually left because of it. So I got dumped for being autistic. I don't know why, but honestly, it makes me laugh. Story 36. Wow, open-stocked. Stumbled idea. Luis Mika said stumbled idea fifio. I told them I didn't want to keep doing the same thing every night, talking them out of depressive thoughts or often self-harm thoughts. I said they needed professional help and that advocating for themselves was the only thing that could truly help them, even though they were able to seek it and chose not to. I could only do so much. They took it as me not wanting to talk to them anymore. I can't remember the exact wording, but they interpreted it as me being tired of them, not the fact that their constant threats of self-harm were draining my mental health. Some heavy stuff. Story 37. My alcoholism. I was afraid to tell my wife of 5 years, 12 years together in total that I needed help. I let her catch me taking a swig from a vodka bottle before a morning walk. I was a highly functioning alcoholic and no one knew how bad it had become. I was desperate and somewhat depressed, leaving clues but afraid to confront her directly. One day she asked, "Do you have a drinking problem?" I said yes, I did, and that I needed help. She left, and I haven't seen her since. She wasn't supportive during rehab. I'll be 1 year sober this month. We had been growing apart, and it took a lot of hard truths to finally see that. Story 38. After seeing The Help, she started listing everything she disliked about it. I told her that I liked the movie, and she completely lost it. We were at Ruby Tuesday when she began crying hysterically. I'm sure the people around us thought I had cheated on her or something. That was basically the end of the relationship. Story 39. I was dating a guy for 3 years and broke up with him because he was generally treating me poorly. About 2 months after we split, we talked, and I found out he was being sued for child support for a 3-year-old son he has in another country. He not only completely hid this from me, but he also blocked the kid's mom when he found out she was pregnant and returned to the US. He was legitimately a deadbeat dad. And, worst of all, didn't even care how his son was doing or if he was okay. While he was trying to wine and dine me at the beginning of our relationship, this woman was sending pictures of her newborn to my ex's mom, and neither of them told me. Needless to say, getting back together is definitely no longer on the table. So disgusting. Story 40. I told my spouse, whom I was married to for 2 years, that I couldn't go to church anymore because I no longer believed in Jehovah. Full story, made short. She divorced me within a year, and worst of all, she told my family. I lost every friend I had in my life. I haven't seen or heard from my mother or father in nearly 18 years, and they all refuse to even acknowledge my existence. I don't have a single family member or friend anymore, and I became homeless for a whole year, since everything I had was tied to being part of the community. The good news is that I have a couple of people I've been talking to over the last few months, so I think I might be on track to having friends again, but the shock of it all has been immense, and I highly doubt I will ever be married again or have a family. If I had known Jehovah's Witnesses were a cult when I was a teenager, I never would have been baptized, and I absolutely never would have married my ex-wife. I still wouldn't have a family, since they would have abandoned me anyway, but at least the shock would have been lessened. Story 41. I tried flirting with my fiancée by jokingly cheating at a thumb war, wrapping my index finger around her thumb. She yanked her hand back as hard as she could and hurt her wrist. I immediately apologized. She then accused me of being an abuser. A while later, she asked if I was mad at her. I admitted I was a little upset about her accusation. Naturally, she kicked me out. This happened just 2 days after I uprooted my life and moved across the country to be with her. Story 42. I used to date a guy briefly who made a stir-fry one night. He asked me for my feedback, which I said was good. He insisted I wasn't being honest. I was, and demanded a detailed critique of his cooking. I told him the stir-fry was good, but the sauce was a bit thin, though it was fine. He was quiet throughout dinner, and when I didn't finish the sauce because it was basically a soup and he hadn't made any noodles or rice with it, he got offended. The next day, he slept with my friend and refused to see or speak to me, even to pick up his clothes. I threw them at his front door and never spoke to him again. I also ended my friendship with my friend. Story 43. I told him I didn't want kids. He did want kids, and I knew that. I had convinced myself that I could have kids for him, but eventually I realized that I truly do not want them. There is no compromise. You can't have a part-time kid. It broke my heart to have to end the relationship. Story 44. I told him that I couldn't continue to financially support both of us the way things were going, so he would need to spend less and get a job. Apparently that was unreasonable. We didn't have kids, he wasn't in school, and he just sat at home playing video games all day without doing any household chores, cooking, or shopping. He had also spent half of our rent money on Dungeons & Dragons books and miniatures the week before rent was due. Story 45. I told him that I couldn't continue to financially support both of us the way things were going, so he would need to spend less and get a job. Apparently, that was unreasonable. We didn't have kids, he wasn't in school, and he just sat at home playing video games all day without doing any household chores, cooking, or shopping. He had also spent half of our rent money on Dungeons & Dragons books and miniatures the week before rent was due. Story 46. I confessed to her that I was feeling depressed. That conversation led to me having to justify my feelings and ended with me comforting her. I don't normally talk about my feelings, but she told me she wanted to hear about my problems. That was the first and last time I opened up about my feelings. After she broke up with me, one of her friends told me that she thought I was being sexist for making her deal with my emotional burdens. Mind you, she complained about her life and feelings to me every single day, and I liked listening. That relationship will always make me think twice about opening up as a man to my partner. I know not everyone is like that, but it hurts to lose a relationship after being vulnerable about your feelings. Story 47. Mine was the opposite. My partner at the time was always telling me to put myself in her shoes. One day, something bad happened at work, and I was consoling her, saying I was sorry and how much the situation sucked. She looked at me and said, "You give crappy advice." I pretty much went numb in the relationship after that, and broke off the engagement 2 months later. Story 48. We went to a restaurant that seemed familiar, but I couldn't recall ever eating there. As we were leaving, it hit me. My brain and my mouth weren't working together, and I blurted out, "I had banged in this parking lot." It was a quiet ride home, and we broke up a few days later. He said he couldn't look at me the same way and would always wonder, no matter where we went, if I had done it in that parking lot. Story 49. He had cheated on his ex-wife with her brother, and he had also cheated on me with him again. He had previously told me that he hadn't cheated, but after he cheated on me repeatedly, I started asking more questions. I could never look at him the same again. Story 50. I told my boyfriend that I had subtly taught him to brush his teeth correctly because I didn't want to hurt his feelings. His teeth used to be in bad shape, with plaque buildup, and I didn't want to kiss him. He said, "I wonder what other things you're hiding from me." We went on a break that day and broke up officially soon after. Story 51. I went on a date with a man who I thought would be emotionally similar to me and understanding. His profile said he was a widower. I told him about my previous boyfriend, fast friend, who had died and how I hadn't loved him the way he wanted and needed me to until it was too late. When I shared this, he said he didn't know what to say because he couldn't relate and asked why I would mention something so unrelatable. I explained that the loss was a part of me, and I thought he would understand because he was a widower. He then told me he wasn't actually a widower. He had put that on his profile because every relationship he had failed. I couldn't speak. I was so shocked and pissed. The next day, I messaged him. One meeting was more than enough. Dead spouses and breakups are not the same thing, and F you, I'd give anything to see my dead boyfriend again, and you could still talk to yours. Story 52. After years of constantly worrying about whether we could keep a roof over our children's heads, dealing with him not parenting while I worked, and feeling like a crappy mom and wife because I was working while he refused to get or keep a job, I no longer loved him. He then spent almost a year threatening to off himself if I didn't come back, while telling anyone who would listen that I had left him for someone else. He was kind of right. I left him for me. Story 53. I told her that I was too tired and not that excited to look at her Animal Crossing world after an 11-hour shift. I still tried, but apparently I didn't care enough. It was hard to care when she had spent an entire year unemployed and drinking every day to work on it, while I busted my A to take care of us. Within a couple of days, she moved out. I'm glad she left because I had too much blind hope that she would grow up and start helping out someday. I didn't want to abandon her at her lowest, which might have been the rest of our lives. Story 54. She asked if I was seeing anyone while we were talking but not yet dating. I said yes, not wanting to lie. I told her I had a fling, but it ended before we slept together. When she asked how long, I said I didn't know, maybe a week or two. She called me a manor and a womanizer. She freaked out and wouldn't let me speak, so I said, "I'm done. We are done," and left. What a wonderful waste of a month, but I dodged a bullet. Story 55. I'm atheist. I don't believe in God. First, I was agnostic at one point and knew this girl from high school into post-college. We started playing with each other and it turned into an on and off fling. At some point, she kept preaching to me. When I finally told her I didn't believe, she quickly blew me off. After 2 more conversations trying to persuade me that I did believe, she started avoiding all conversations with me. It remained an on and off fling until it was 100% over. I've never chatted with her since, though I've tried. Second, a girl I met on a dating app really liked me, and we kissed in the car. I liked her too, but she posted a religious quote on Instagram. On our 5th date, I told her I didn't believe, and lo and behold, she ghosted me. Just had to get it out there so we're not wasting time. Story 56. I told her I liked another guy but still really liked her, which was true. Completely my fault, and I've definitely learned my lesson, but I still feel crappy about it a year later. I didn't cheat on her, just had a small crush on this guy and it weighed heavily on my conscience, so I told her, I hate myself for it. Story 57. So I pointed out to him that he had many behavioral similarities to my 2 autistic children, plus some differences they didn't have. I wasn't being nasty, I wanted him to get help as he was really struggling with these behaviors. He told his vile excuse of a mother, and they both threatened to side with my abusive ex-husband in court when his assault charges went to hearing. The victims? My kids. That absolutely ended the relationship and any chance of reconciliation. Story 58. About 6 months into the relationship, she showed me her live journal. I knew she kept an online journal, but I wasn't aware to what degree I was featured, nor that she had a large audience for the time. She didn't post anything inappropriate, but there were tons of entries about us, things we had done together. Her thoughts, photos, all broadcast to hundreds of strangers who had their own opinions and comments about my life. I remember one photo I never thought would see the light of day. One of those very unflattering but also very sweet couples photos. She was so excited to show me that it had multiple conversations under it, spanning over 1,000 comments, with everyone saying we seemed fantastic together. God, it was bad. A couple of days later, I told her it made me very uncomfortable. She kept digging at my points, and when I used the word violation, she completely lost it. Long story short, we had our first argument. She left, avoided me at school, and broke up with me through a mutual friend, a couple of days later. A few years later, I was dating someone whose dad owned a construction company that had been scamming people and local government contracts for years. They were Midwestern rich, huge house on 100 acres, brand new pickups, bass boats, a whole room devoted to a gun collection, ATVs, you name it. When he was finally caught, they lost almost everything, including my girlfriend's brand new 2005 Mustang GT. When she broke the news to me, she didn't fault her dad at all. She was only upset that all their stuff was being taken. When I pointed out that a lot of their things were basically stolen, she dumped me. Story 59. I told my ex about how I was abused when I was 9. He thought it was unreasonable to cry over it and told me to stop acting depressed so much, saying I was just putting on a show to get attention. Needless to say, I broke it off with him within 2 days after he said that. We were 15 at the time. I'm so glad I ended it, or else I wouldn't have met my current boyfriend. Story 60. I told her I needed to push back the wedding. I had issues from a serious previous endeavor that I felt had led to some failures. I had mostly moved past them, but the summer before our wedding, we spent time apart while I went to a lucrative internship. While there, I fell back into some bad habits. I was seriously concerned that my lingering issues could undermine our marriage. I called her and told her that I still absolutely wanted to marry her, but I needed to push it back a bit while I worked on myself. She said the wedding was off. We already had invitations printed. She broke off the relationship when I got back in town. Unrelated, this all happened a few days before September 11th. 20 years later, I realized I was probably right that my issues could have wrecked the marriage. We were both really young. It's easy to wish the issues hadn't been there, but I'm ultimately proud of myself for not ignoring them. She was one of my favorite people, and I'm glad we've both built successful families in our own time and way. Story 61. My first boyfriend broke up with me almost every single day for about a year. I was 14, he was 18. It was a long-distance relationship, but we'd see each other occasionally on dates that I would have to pay for, plus cover gas money for him to pick me up. Well, my grandpa would pay, but still. Anyway, one of the countless times he broke up with me was because my great-grandpa, who raised me and was the closest last non-abusive member of my family, died. I didn't check my phone until 8:30 because he had passed at 7:15, and I spent that time holding his body and sobbing. I finally called my boyfriend back in tears to tell him my grandpa had died. He screamed at me, calling me a friggin' bishanor, and said it was over. I was perfectly fine with that. Then later that day, he called just to call me a bish again, for not answering the phone while my best friend and great-grandpa had died. Story 62. When my nieces were born, my ex was legitimately jealous of the attention I was giving them. Their parents, well, they weren't raising them at the time, so the responsibility fell to me and my mom. I had them a lot. Keep in mind, they didn't have anyone else. It was an unusual circumstance, and I was dumbfounded that he could be jealous of children. I said, I am so glad I never had any with you. I cannot imagine feeling guilty for giving my child attention. He just looked at me like I was crazy. It was never the same after that, and to be honest, I don't mind. He was a jerk. He once told me to get over it when I cried to him about my grandmother passing away in my arms. Story 63. I told my then boyfriend that I was going to the police station. He was 18, and I had caught him taking photos of a woman who had passed out drunk. He gaslit me saying I hadn't seen anything, even though I had seen those types of photos on his phone before and had literally watched him take the photos from multiple angles. He had even gotten me drunk and tried to tell me it was all in my head. He talked me out of going to the police. Stupid, I know, but I was on holiday with his family, interstate, and underage drinking was involved. He then dumped me when we got home. 15 years later, I still regret believing him when he said he'd change and not going to the police to report him. Story 64. My corn addiction. I was with a girl I met in law school for a few weeks, and she was trying to get me to open up. I thought I was already being open with her, but the only secret I was keeping was my OF account and some adult-oriented Instagram pages. I had been trying to fix it by deleting the account and unfollowing those pages. This was a few days after we first had been intimate. I wanted to be honest with her and let her know I was controlling it, but when I told her, the situation went badly. She started thinking I didn't respect her and was only using her. She didn't believe I was a virgin and claimed I was manipulating her. None of that was true. She was the first girlfriend I had in years, and I was trying to be as open as possible. It went from bad to worse. She started to relapse into vaping and said she felt betrayed by me. She used to say I made her feel safe, but after my confession, she became distrustful and distant. The following week, I tried to get close to her since the conversation had seemed to end on a good note. She was standoffish whenever I approached her and rejected my advances, even though the night before we had PDA. There were a lot of miscommunications, and I had to rethink many things about the relationship. 2 days later, after a very long conversation about our relationship priorities and what we both wanted, we ended up breaking up. She had her own issues and thought it would be best if we weren't together. Story 65. I worked with a guy, Paul, for about 6 months. When his contract wasn't renewed, I found out that his French girlfriend of many years had left him because he lied about his age, among other things. 3 years later, I'm in a restaurant owned by a friend, and there's a pretty waitress from Belarus working there. I ask my friend about her, and he tells me her boyfriend is a colleague of mine. I ask who it is, and he says it's Paul, who hadn't worked with me in 3 years. He was leaving every day, telling her he was going to work at a place he hadn't been in years. Totally weird. Story 66. Not me, but my cousin, 30, on my father's side admitted to his girlfriend, 30 of 3 years, that he had an on-paper fake marriage with my cousin on my mother's side, a green card marriage for $50,000. I don't think it was the fake marriage itself that caused the issue, but the principle that he withheld such a red flag story until he believed she loved him so much she wouldn't ever leave him. My guess is that if he had shared this within 6 months of them dating, or even within 1 month of becoming official, she probably wouldn't have cared much about the fake marriage. Story 67. We were long distance, and he was at a crossroads in his career. He could potentially move to my high cost of living city so we could be together, or stay where he had more roots and stability. Either way, he would be taking a position that was a couple of years away from being highly in demand nationwide and well remunerated, no matter which city he chose. He had applied to both. I told him that I really cared about him and loved him. I said that while I would be thrilled if he moved to my city, I completely understood and supported him staying in his own. I explained that I was in it for the long haul, that I was serious about him, and that I was happy to do the majority of the work for the relationship while he pursued his goals. He broke up with me directly afterward. Story 68. I told him that I didn't mind if he didn't text me constantly during the day. I understood he was busy, but if he could take a second to respond and check in, instead of not talking for 12 or more hours, it would ease my mind. He broke up with me because he didn't think he could give me what I needed. I guess a simple text really is too much to ask for some people. Story 69. A girl said, "I love you," and I told her, "No, you don't," and ended it. She started crying and getting bare, saying, "Let's bang," and I left. As I was leaving, she got dressed and followed me to the parking lot, trying to figure out what the problem was. We were just supposed to be sleeping with each other. That's it. We never went on dates or hung out. We would just text each other when we were in the mood or bored, sleep together and leave. We hardly ever talked. Story 70. I told her I was depressed and got the classic, "What do you have to be depressed about?" response. It made me start checking out of the relationship, but because she was my first girlfriend, I stuck it out for 2 more years, thinking I wouldn't be able to get another girlfriend. I guess I got dependent. Ultimately, the relationship ended during the pandemic. It's better this way. Now I can focus on school and other things. Story 71. We were talking about self-esteem, and I admitted that I had never liked myself. Maybe I even hated myself. She hit me with, "How am I supposed to love you if you can't love yourself?" Honestly, it took me off guard and I didn't have a response. She was right, of course. That wasn't exactly the breaking point, but I see that conversation as a kind of page break, a clear indication of how things were going to go for me in the next chapter of my life. I was dealing with relatively severe depression and anxiety that I hadn't fully addressed, and I was quickly heading down the path of addiction in my attempts to self-medicate and avoid turning inward. I had been able to dance around it during college, but by the time of that conversation, we had both graduated. She was making plans for her future, and I was self-destructing. Story 72. She was my first girlfriend, back in my teens, and I was incredibly insecure because of things that had happened in my life and family. After being together for 10 months, she went to a concert with some of our friends. I didn't live nearby, so I couldn't have gone with them. One of the friends was known to have a crush on her. After about a week of self-doubt, I asked her if she had done anything intimate with that guy, only because my insecurity had acted up. She didn't answer my question and just broke up with me, saying, "If you can't trust me, I can't trust you either, so a relationship is meaningless." Story 73. Not sure if it counts as a confession, but I had a relationship end because I said I thought Judy and Nick from Zootopia made a nice couple. To be specific, she strongly argued that they should only be friends. She went off the rails when I said, "I guess we'll have to agree to disagree." She was furious and said I was belittling her feelings. At that point, our relationship was already on the rocks, and I had promised myself I would never apologize for something that was not my fault again. I had apologized many times before just to keep the peace. So I said I would not apologize, and we broke up. For reference, this was not high school. We were both in our upper 20s at the time. Story 74. I had gotten myself into major debt and lied about it. I confessed, and of course it broke her trust. It was a completely logical decision for her to end it, but I had a hard time seeing that at the time. Even good things sometimes have to end for us to grow. In hindsight, I have a lot of respect for her for making the difficult decision to end our engagement. We are both now married and have kids, so it really was for the better, even if I think about it now and then. Story 75. After telling him more than 5 times that his interactions with a certain person made me uncomfortable, nothing changed. And then he said, "When I join a new university, I'll video call you on the weekends. You don't have to talk to me every day, but on weekends you will have to for some time, or there will be a punishment of 1,000 kisses. I'll show you my room after I decorate it. It would be so nice." Story 76. I told them that I had developed a crush on someone else and felt guilty because I had to be around that person regularly since we played on the same sports team. I thought I was doing the right thing by being honest, but things were never the same after that, and it eventually led to our relationship ending. I am still not sure if I made the right decision, but the guilt was eating me alive. Live and learn, I suppose. Story 77. I decided to change my major, which meant I had to move across the state to another campus. That left us with two options: break up or try a long-distance relationship. At first, I thought we could handle long distance, but I eventually admitted that I did not want to do that. We agreed that once I moved, we would break up. Story 78. He told me I was too young for him, then started dating someone even younger. The night we broke up, he said he wanted to talk in another room while his friend was over. I thought it was strange. I went to grab my purse, but he said it would be quick and not to worry. He took me into the other room and broke up with me while his friend robbed me. Months later, he begged me to take him back, and I told him I had enough self-respect to say no. I never got my things back. Rest in peace, iPod Shuffle. Story 79. I confess this in parts. The hardest part was admitting that I had been in 2 abusive relationships where I was emotionally abused while I was in a very low place. What I had not admitted yet was that one of those situations involved someone who was a friend, more of an acquaintance to my ex. I was young and did what I thought was supposed to happen when you got close to someone. I did not understand some social cues. In short, that acquaintance was actually married. I did not know at the time, but once I realized I had made several mistakes, I backed off. They had also been using me. After that, I ended up in an even worse relationship. What made it more complicated was that my ex later grew close to the husband of that acquaintance and emotionally cheated on me with him. She still does not admit it, even though I was shown everything. It was a mess, and I know I should have told her sooner. I just wish I had received even a fraction of the trust I gave her when she was not fully honest with me. It affected me deeply and made me realize the imbalance in how we treated each other, especially in terms of patience and understanding. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.